Welcome to another conversation with Joe Reagan. And tonight, Joe, I'm failing. I don't understand what's going on. I feel like I'm not connecting with people. I think maybe my ideas are old and slow. Thoughts, Joe?
Thoughts, Gary? I think you are probably one of the more attuned people in our community when it comes to a lot of these hyper local issues. But you know, one of the challenges that I think that Democrats are going to face that they're not anticipating. I think this is a real concern of mine that the if you look at the unpopularity of the Trump agenda, the GOP agenda, everything that's happening in Washington, right? And it is. Everything that's happening in Washington is driven by the GOP. There's very little, if any, cross-aisle collaboration that's occurring with anything. The Republicans are running the show, and every decision is being driven by GOP policies. And
Decisions? Are they making decisions?
I mean, they just decided to boost what 11 million people off of healthcare. They just offered to give to increase the deficit by several $trillions. They gave tax cuts to the wealthy while screwing over the middle and working class.
Hang on, Joe. I've got to get my crying towel out here.
But one thing that I think was what's being left behind in the conversation, and I thought this was kind of interesting. When you look at HR 1,
Okay.
the that was passed on such thin margins. I kind of feel like it was a lost opportunity for the Democrats because there was enough opposition by moderate Republicans to the bill that I feel like had the Democrats at least put something out there, what's an alternative to these policies? What would that look like? And could you get some of those Republicans on board, or at least get them on record of voting against the Democrats? And this is something that you've seen show up in a number of different polls, nationally and locally, that while the GOP is hugely unpopular, the Democratic Party is not doing much better. In certain races, certain candidates are outperforming Republicans, but generally speaking, the Democrats still don't have the trust of the American people
Is
on
it
a
the
lot of issues.
leadership?
It's a lack of leadership, really, is what it comes down to. Is I think that you have party leaders that have convinced themselves that through mobilization alone, through being anti-Trump, through pushing back in MAGA, and all those things are important. But at its core, when you listen to people as to the why, and especially your swing voters, why would you not vote for Democrats? Why this? And it's because on a lot of those issues, the Democrats haven't presented an alternative policy vision. And I kind of remember this, and I know we were talking about this earlier. During one of the debates during the last cycle, I was. There's actually a great picture from the Gazette of me, and it's a mixture of laughter and frustration. It was comical to listen to Jeff Crank talk about what America First means to him. And so I took the opportunity to be like, listen, no, this is what you're talking about, and what we're seeing, and now what we're seeing put into practice, into policy, puts America last. And I think that if Democrats were smart at both the national and local levels, they would start to present those policy alternatives to say, what is the Democratic alternative? Let's not let Republicans control the conversation and own the phrase putting America first. Because I look at the history of the Democratic Party and I would say, well, from a policy perspective, it's the Democrats that have consistently put the American workers first, that have put American families first, that have put really the vast majority of the population first by providing opportunities like Social Security, like Medicare, Medicaid, all these different programs, like supporting schools, making sure that schools have the resources to address the needs of children with disabilities. And the Republicans have consistently really only represented the interests of the top 1-2% of Americans. And this whole notion of, this the table scrap economy, right? Oh, well, if the wealthy thrive, then the rest of you will thrive off of whatever falls off their table. There's an opportunity there to push back on that and say, listen, no, America thrives when we support our working class. And so when you go back and say, well, when were some of the most prosperous times in American history? And most people would say, well, the 50s and the 60s. Well, in the 50s and the 60s, you had a tax rate on the top 1% that was like 70%.
95.
And right? And the funny thing is that, and we've talked about this before, right? So Republicans just cut $4 trillion out of Medicaid. And I'm going to come back to that one because there's an interesting tie into some other areas here. But they just cut $4 trillion from Medicaid, which is going to push approximately 11 million Americans off of their health care.
Okay.
And it paid, and they did that because they gave a $7 trillion tax cut to the top 1% of Americans.
Right.
And so and we've talked about funny math in the past, right? So just because someone doesn't have health care doesn't mean they're not going to consume health resources. And so these, as I've said multiple times, these are people that will continue to get health services from local hospitals. And I think you have some figures that you can share with us.
Yes.
Those hospitals will have to eat, because that will become a non-reimbursable expense for them, will now have to pay out of pocket, which means you, with private insurance, are going to have to pay out of pocket. And so just like Trump's tax cut or tariffs, this is a tax on working class Americans. You, as a working class American, are now going to have to pay for someone else to get health care that could have been paid for by the top 1% had we not given them the tax cut. And
well, if I could jump in here.
Yeah.
The big bad bill is providing $50 billion for rural hospitals. Okay, sounds pretty good. Except through their changes in Medicare, Medicaid coming up, they're pulling $150 billion out of the rural hospital system. So we're going to have some hospitals hurt, especially in the rural areas. And Colorado 5th is not alone.
No.
We can't say that there is not going to be any pain in the rural areas, because there will be. And of course, you're not going to hear that from Jeff Crank.
Quite the opposite. The Republicans have really tried to go quickly out on the offensive to say, oh no, this bill is this bill's the greatest thing that's ever happened. We're going to win like we'd never won before. Well, I got news for you. Every piece of economic data that we have on policies like this suggests that no, this is going to hurt Americans and the American economy in some of the most extreme ways. And here's the funny thing. None of these cuts come into effect until 2026.
Until after the election.
After the election. And so we won't even see the pain. And then, right, it's now we're seeing some impacts already, but the larger impacts we won't even see that for another 2 years. Now, in the state of Colorado, we've already had conversations around the fact that the way that Tabor adjusts for inflation, that formula is fundamentally flawed. And
no kidding.
Well,
what gave you the first clue?
Well, I know people get really, right? So this is a discussion problem, right? So when Democrats come out and say, hey, we need to relook this, and then Republicans respond with, oh, the Democrats want to kill Tabor. No. Specifically, and if you talk to guys like Senator Bridges and folks on the Finance Committee, they'll tell you, no, we want to maintain the majority of Tabor. The equation that is used to bring in inflation into that's the thing that needs to change specifically.
Yes. Yeah.
And really, and so that's, And we saw that this budgetary cycle where the state had to make a lot of cuts, mostly to schools. And this isn't funding these other programs, right? That's all a lie. At the end of the day, if you look at the state budget, which is all public record, really easy to go in and look at what the state's spending money on, these are not frivolous programs. These are things that you and I use on a daily basis. And so again, the cuts to Medicaid, how that's going to play out is the way that the federal government reimburses the states. So the federal government isn't actually going to cut anything. They're just not going to pay the states for providing that health care, which means states like Colorado are now going to have to go back and now have to make those difficult decisions as to how we do that. So,
well, you can't get blood out of a turnip. I can't even say turnip anymore. But what I'm going to say here, just in Colorado 5th, where you're climbing up the ladder, guess how many people are on Medicaid?
78,000.
How about 178,000?
Oh, I missed a one.
Yeah, you missed the decimal point or a comma. About 11,000 of them are permanently disabled. Okay. And I understand, the governors are going to have to go back and start picking and choosing.
Yep.
And of course, education is going to get cut. And what raises my hackles on that is I just saw a chart of the top 25 countries in the world with the highest IQs. And guess who's not on that list?
I would assume the U.S.
U.S. is not on it. Russia's not on it. North Korea's not on it. Saudi Arabia's not on it. Qatar's not on it. But there's one Mideastern country that's on it, and it just surprised me. And I'll let you try that one on for size.
Qatar's not on it. Saudi's not on it. Is it Iran?
Very good.
That is surprising.
That is surprising. They're third in the list.
Huh.
And I'm saying, apparently they're a lot smarter than us, and we shouldn't be messing around with them. I mean, as far as being aggressive in a military aspect of it, we should be bringing them into the fold.
Well, and when you look at the regulatory treaty that was put into play under the Obama administration, it largely found that balance of balancing sanctions with enforcement, with inspections, that it gave us a lot more insight into what was happening into Iran than it's publicly acknowledged. Let's say it that way, right? So this, while the framework kind of downplayed the U.S. involvement, it did give us a lot of insight. So go to the bombings that were executed the other week, and the knowledge that we had of that site. Part of that was likely because of the access that was gained through that series of treaties, because inspectors were able to go in and had some of that knowledge and understood what was happening.
Yeah.
Well, not to say that that's 100% truthful. Like there's a whole. I've done some of the treaty monitoring stuff. Like this is very, very complex work, but in another example of the incompetence that exists, and right. So this is that alternative. So let me bring it back to our kind of the alternative piece here is, this administration is pursuing a transactional approach to international affairs, which does not exist. This is Donald Trump is playing tic-tac-toe, and the rest of the world is playing chess.
Three-dimensional chess.
Yeah. And this is where, and I'm not saying, right, and I'm all for looking for reform, understanding how we can be more efficient, how can we be more effective, all of these things. And as someone that's worked in and around the business community, the nonprofit community, right? I get that. Let's make sure we're making every dollar count and stretch it as far as we can. But this transactional approach is honestly far more wasteful. And just what we're seeing in Ukraine is a great example, right? We order weapons cut off, and then we have a bad phone call with Vladimir Putin, and so, oh well, we have to send more weapons to Ukraine now. It's the lack of consistency that threatens our allies. And so if we want to prevent Iran or North Korea from getting a nuclear weapon, or if they have one, if we need to understand what the full capability is, we need our allies to support us in that endeavor. And the only way the allies are going to get behind us is if we have consistency in our foreign policy. And that's what is fundamentally lacking, is there's not only a lack of consistency in a general approach, but there's a lack of consistency in literally what is our foreign policy today. And it seems like if you're a news junkie, kind of like I am, hourly, our national policy shifts based on the whims of what Donald Trump is seeing on Fox News.
Well, our domestic policy isn't any better. I mean, when you get down to it, I feel like when I get up in the morning and watch the news, I like to watch the 7 o'clock portion, it's almost like we're getting a knot yanked in our tail.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, how many more knots is going to get yanked in our tail today?
Yep.
And so, it just goes on and on.
Well, and this is an example that's been brought up to me a couple times.
Yeah.
Right? So now that H.R. 1 has passed, and Trump got his policy document put into law, a lot of people have been asking about how this is going to impact veterans programs. And the challenge is we're really not going to fully understand what that will look like for probably 2 years. Mm-hmm. And the specifics of how programs are going to be laid out is also not clear. And so if you watch the Senate hearings on the Small Business Administration, for example, the Small Business Administration has a program called the Veteran Business Outreach Center that is operated nationwide. And of course, that's the program I run here in the state of Colorado. That program is one of 14 that the Small Business Administration has identified to consolidate under another SBA-related entity. And it would actually be a state-level entity that would be managing 14 different initiatives that would include programs designed to help veterans, women, and minority-owned small businesses that want to get off the ground. And these are economic drivers, right?
Will that be better or worse?
It would be worse, because it would ultimately result in cutting back on some of these programs and removing the people. And so a great example, one of the initiatives that I'm working on right now at the national level is trying to streamline so within the Veterans Administration, you have what's called vocational rehab. So vocational rehab it's money that a veteran can use for training if they have a disability that prevents them from working in a field that they've already been trained in. And there's a whole process to go through that. One of the tracks that exists is what's called the self-employment track. So you, for whatever reason, your disability says, hey, you really can't work in these different capacities anymore, but running a small business might actually be a beneficial piece to you. So if we can just train you on a couple of small things, then you will be able to thrive in the community. And the problem is that the Veterans Administration that would administer those dollars doesn't understand anything about small business. So the part of the process and what we're trying to formalize is if somebody is going through vocational rehab and the counselor that they're working with identifies self-employment as being a potential solution to helping that veteran thrive, refer them over to the Veteran Business Center, and the Veteran Business Center can then support them with training, with knowledge, with counseling to get that small business up and running. And here in the state of Colorado, This year alone, we've generated an additional it was about $2.1 million in revenue raised by small businesses just this year. Those are just folks that started out businesses this year. And veteran-owned small business in the state of Colorado is about $42 billion. So this is not a program that is wasting money. This is a program that leads to legitimate revenue increases and productivity. This is what is strengthening rural Colorado. These are programs that are strengthening Colorado Springs. There's hundreds of small veteran-owned small businesses here in El Paso County, and I get a chance to work with a lot of them. And these programs going away, it's going to seriously hurt not only existing businesses but up and coming businesses, and that feeds into a lot of different things. Again, if you look at the types of businesses that veterans own here in El Paso County, it's everything from an Etsy shop to I've got clients that are working to build new laser technology that they want to sell to the Air Force. So there is a national security implication to this aspect as well. And this is the sort of thoughtlessness of saying, hey, as Democrats, what do we think? And I would argue that, first of all, I think Democrats have always been really bad at separating big business from small business, because small business owners are working class Americans. And we should be making sure that we're making that investment in small business, because we are the party of Main Street. And so let's talk about that. Let's say, hey, we want to see programs that help small business owners thrive. We want to make sure that downtown Colorado Springs maintains its character. Right? We don't want chain restaurants in there. I want to find somebody that really loves this city to create a restaurant or a shop that reflects all the amazing things about our community. And you can't do.
Please.
Right? And who's going to disagree with that? Right? That's what we want. Those of us, we live here because this is a special place. It's a special, between our military installations, between the Olympic Committee, this is really an all-American city that represents so many amazing things, and it's got such great character. We should be investing in those people that are proud of that. And investing in small business is one of the ways that you do that. And who invests in small business? The Democrats. And who invests in big business? Who wants Amazon? That's the Republicans. And that's what this bill represents, is it continues to support those big businesses, those chain stores that are going to bully out and make mom and pop stores obsolete. And not only does that impact Tejon, but it's impacting main streets across rural Colorado, where these businesses aren't able to thrive.
Is there anything that can be done at the state level to backstop these businesses? Or has anybody even thought about it or even discussed it?
Yeah, yes. The answer is I'm thinking about it. I think about it a lot, and have tried to build in some contingencies on what we might do in order to get that done. I will say that because that kind of, like I said, I try and keep work and politics separate as much as I can. But I would tell you that I think there are some opportunities, but it's going to require, to be successful, require a lot of public-private partnership. So not just involvement from state-level entities, but also looking at bringing in some private donors that are willing to make those investments. And there's some lending, and that really comes back to, can we work with some of these lending institutions that also recognize the fact that the return on investment from small business is much greater. And, that's, when you look at SBA loan programs, these help to reduce the risk to the lenders that when they are doing the math on that, they've found time and time again that making the investment in a startup, sometimes even without SBA underwriting, is a much greater investment for the bank. If I can fund a small business, my return on that investment is going to be greater. And those lenders, and some of them are local lenders, some of the local banks, some of these are big banks. But across the spectrum, these loan officers, these bank presidents are the ones that look at this and say, yeah, investing in small business, investing in Main Street is smart. That's smart. There's a business case behind this, and Republicans continue to prioritize, supporting big businesses where there's very little return on that investment for the workers, for the local government, for the region. I would argue that if you look at what's happening with Amazon out by the airport right now, sure, it might be a big number, but compared to the amount that small business is contributing to city sales tax revenue, to property revenues, and to all these different things, the collective contribution of small business is far greater, and that's where I think we have a strong case to make as Democrats to say, again, when we talk about working class Americans, we're talking about small business owners too. And those are the folks that we want to make that investment in, because that's putting America first, is investing in small business.
Okay. One thing that I learned a long time ago at a meeting, and I'll give you a prime example. Just outside of downtown, there was this mall, and it had all these little mom and pop businesses in it, including a pizza parlor.
Mm-hmm.
And never ate there, but I mean, it was there. And it was an old structure, been around for 30, 40 years, maybe even longer. But they site cleared that out of there, all those businesses out of there, and put it in a CVS pharmacy. Now, who's going to generate more revenue, CVS pharmacy, or those 6 or 8 businesses that were in there, including the pizza parlor, contributing as far as sales tax revenue to the city?
Yep.
And that's a real hard concept to get through to the planners, is that before you start site clearing property, how much revenue is it bringing in as is versus what is going to be put on it?
Mm-hmm. About a year ago, Councilwoman Henjum hosted an event at the Citadel Mall. And the conversation that she was leading was around this idea of how do we reinvigorate the Citadel Mall? And there were a couple different issues at play there. And one was communication, right?
Yeah.
If pretty much if anything happens within a 10-mile radius of the Citadel Mall, bad, right? Then it happened at the Citadel Mall. Oh, there was, and watch the news when someone says, oh, there was a shooting by the Citadel Mall. Well, where was it? Oh, it was, 10 blocks north.
Yeah.
But there's no geographic landmark to put there. So the news is like, oh yeah, it was by the Citadel Mall.
Yeah.
And so that kind of discouraged it. That was discouraging people from showing up. But then the Citadel Mall is owned by the Simon Group, or whatever it is. This is an investment group that owns a whole bunch of malls nationwide. Right. And because these were investors, they really didn't care if the businesses that were there thrived. They just, as long as the return on investment was there, they were good. And that's another area that I think the city and the state government can get more involved, of how do we communicate with those investors? How do we work with them to make them see the fact that, hey, if you make a small investment in this property, then your return will go up. And, and again, as Democrats, I think sometimes we get afraid to talk about, return on investment and how investors are operating and all those things. And right, we need to keep that in check too. But at the end of the day, when people put money up in order to invest in these projects, make them a stakeholder. Make sure that they understand the fact that, hey, investing in Citadel Mall and making that a thriving aspect of the community would not just benefit the community, but those that invested to make it work will also see the return on that. And this is that fundamental difference between the Republicans that see the table scrap economy of, oh, well, if we feed the rich, you all can survive off the scraps from their table.
Yeah.
Versus the Democratic philosophy, which is, hey, if we're able to empower working class Americans, if we're investing in them to allow them to thrive, then it's the rising tide economy of, hey, if the working class Americans are thriving, well, guess what? The rest of us do too. And that's what we saw in the 1960s. And there's a lot of stuff behind that. So when I talk about that, don't take that as like, oh, well, Joe's just trying to be secretive against the, support the, no. But it really is that base philosophy of, hey, a rising tide economy is what we want to create. And that's the way that we view this. And that's where you see Main Street thrive. That's where you see Tejon thrive. That's where you're going to see the Citadel Mall come back and continue to thrive. But we have to make those investments. And when you do, it's just smart. And another great one. So Ronald Reagan came into the presidency, the GOP gutted Veterans Affairs. They gutted it. Mm-hmm. And the Congressional Budget Office did a study on Veterans Affairs. And do you know what they found? For every $1 the U.S. government spends on Veterans Affairs, do you know what the return is for the community?
Or
$7. $7. For every dollar we spend on Veterans Affairs, $7 are generated in the community. And that's through things like the GI Bill, where if we invest in the education, those veterans can go on and thrive. It's like those small business programs that I was just talking about, where if we invest in veteran entrepreneurs, they create value for the economy, for all of us, for our community. And when we invest in the healthcare of veterans, again, they're able to get out there and thrive. And that creates value for the community. And I talk about veterans a lot because that's the space that I tend to operate in. But the lessons that I've learned there are the same thing for every other aspects of the community, right? When we're investing in early childhood development programs, the community thrives because of that. When we invest in things like our public school system, the community benefits from that on so many different levels. When we invest in small business, in all these other areas, that return benefits the entire community. And the funny thing is, and this is that funny math again, we don't need to raise the tax level to 90-something%. Adding a 40% tax bracket on top of, for those making over $1 million would literally balance the budget without having to cut a thing. And so, as a Democrat, I would say, you know what? That sounds pretty reasonable to me. And the return that we get on that is huge. And you even have folks like Warren Buffett that have said, yeah, you should be taxing us more, because Warren Buffett, the world's greatest investor, also said, by investing in these programs, you are going to see a substantial return for the rest of the community. The rising tide economy. And that's what Democrats need to start pulling together, because if we really want to talk about putting America first, the rising tide economy is where we need to go.
Okay, I've got one loaded question to ask you.
All right.
What kind of leadership do the Dems need to make this happen?
A few weeks ago when I was at DemFest up in Denver, I had a chance to speak with Congressman Crow. And one of the things that he mentioned like 4 or 5 times was, we need to find people that already have the trust of the community. We don't need more Democrats. We need people that are trusted members of the community that also happen to be Democrats. And we need to be advancing those people. Jared Golden from Maine has said something similar of, it really comes down to hyper-local politics. How do we find people that understand their district and are able to speak to the needs of their constituents more than on the national issues? And for our community, some of those national issues are really important to us. But understanding the nuance that exists within our community for us, for this race locally, and one of the reasons that I've now invested going on 3 years of my life to winning the seat, is because when you see what's really happening in the community, you realize these national sound bites aren't resonating with people. And so we have to create that alternative, and it has to come from a trusted messenger. And I think when it comes to a lot of national level Democrats, they're not a trusted messenger in communities outside of liberal safe havens. Right? Nancy Pelosi is a great example. I don't agree with Nancy Pelosi on everything. I don't think I have anything personally against her, but she's running a safe seat her entire career. So Nancy Pelosi can say whatever she wants, because at the end of the day, a primary challenger is really hard to outseat her, and there's no chance a Republican wins that seat. And so elevating Democrats that are winning in swing seats is the key, because that's part of it. And so if you have a Democrat that's won a swing seat, elevate those people to leadership roles, have them drive those policy discussions. And if you're in a seat like ours, where it's never been held by a Democrat, but the tide is shifting, find the trusted voices in the community. Who are the people that folks know, not as a Democrat, not as a politician, but as someone in the community that's out there doing stuff? Find those people, elevate them, elect them. That's what the Democrats need to be doing.
Are you one of them?
Well, I certainly hope so. And
Okay.
and when I lost the primary last cycle,
Yeah.
and someone said, "What are you going to do now?" I said, "Listen, I live here. At the end of the day, tomorrow morning you're going to see me at my son's Little League game, and a few weeks from now you're going to see me at parent teacher night." And I ran into a voter today that recognized me as I was walking down Nevada during my lunch break. And so, like I said, I'm running because I do think I'm one of those people. And believe me when I tell you that there's a tremendous amount of humility that comes behind that as well. Because I am someone that looks at this and say, I feel like I'm in the right place, but, at the end of the day, it's the voters that get to make that decision. And I guess I would ask people, hey, where do you want to find, where would you want to find your congressman? And Jeff and Doug, they were never there.
That's right. And judging from Jeff's newsletters, if you want to call it that, he's not interested in the people in this community or in CO5 in general. You
Right.
can tell by what he puts into his email that he's only caring about Jeff and any photo op, and what he's talking about means absolutely zip to the citizens. I mean, we've had that 179,000 people on Medicaid, and Jeff doesn't even mention that in his newsletter. And they're voters.
Yeah.
I mean, plain and simple, they're
people.
voters.
It's not even about voters. It's about people. These are people.
Right.
And so I was talking to a voter, one of our neighbors, the other day, and I know we're running over here, but it's okay.
It's only money.
It's okay. So I was calling to speak to a woman, and a woman answers the phone. And I ask, I said, "Is this so-and-so?" She says, "No, that's my mother. She has throat cancer, and she can't talk anymore." So I answer her phone calls, and I kind of translate. I said, "Oh, well, I'm Joe, and I'm running for Congress." Kind of give my little pitch. And she said, "Yeah, I'm one of those people that's going to get kicked off Medicaid." And she's like, "I am the sole caregiver to my mother and my disabled daughter. And that's a choice because these programs don't cover in-home care. And someone needs to," and she's not sick enough to get put into a nursing home and have them pay for that. So I don't have a choice. I have to care for my mother and my daughter, who are both disabled, or no one cares for them. And that's the human aspect to that. And we lose sight of that. And I think that's because, when you look at Jeff's background and where he comes from, and he is a career political insider and has worked his entire life really just echoing the talking points that were fed to him by the Heritage Foundation and the Koch brothers.
Right.
And you want a great policy example of there's no other reason you voted this way except for this, which is on the land sales, the public land sales. Jeff Hurd in CD3 voted against it because it was not in the interests of CD3.
Right.
Jeff Crank voted for it. Why? Why wouldn't he side with the other his fellow Colorado delegate to stand up to support public land? Who's going to profit from the sale of public land? The oil and gas industry.
Right.
And who controls the Heritage Foundation? Who's been paying Jeff Crank bills for 20 years? The oil and gas industry.
You're not referring to Charles Koch, are you?
I absolutely am.
Okay. Okay, Joe, thank you so very much for another Joe Reagan conversation.
And don't forget, ReaganForColorado.com. We can send a message to Jeff Crank that this, and I hate it. Believe me, I'm the first one that wants to get money out of politics. But this cycle, I need a lot of money to get Jeff Crank out of politics. So please, ReaganForColorado.com. Every donor, every dollar matters in this election. So help us out.
Okay. Thank you, Joe. See you next time.
See you, Gary.
Goodbye.